Ethan once believed that life was steady and safe. He had built his own small company with years of hard work. For a time, everything seemed bright. He had a wife named Laura who smiled beside him, and a little boy named Noah, who brought joy into their home. Noah had been born with a disability that made him depend on a wheelchair, but to Ethan, that only made him more precious. Ethan promised himself that he would always protect his son and give him a good life. But one year turned into a storm. Ethan's company began to fall apart after a series of failures. He tried every path to save it, but his money drained away, and debt followed close behind. Every night he stayed awake, searching for answers, but every morning came with heavier news. The burden grew, and so did the silence in his house. Laura's smile began to fade. She no longer laughed at Noah's small jokes, and she no longer looked at Ethan with the same warmth. Instead, her words grew sharp. She said she was tired of living in struggle. She said she had given enough. Ethan begged her to hold on, to trust that he would rise again, but her heart was no longer with him. One evening, after Noah had gone to sleep, Laura spoke with finality. She confessed that she was leaving. She had met another man, someone with wealth and stability. Ethan stood frozen, his heart breaking as he listened to her. He tried to remind her of their vows and of their son who needed her, but she had already chosen her path. The next morning, Noah waited at the window for his mother, but she never returned. Ethan told his son the truth in gentle words. Noah's small face crumbled, and tears fell down his cheeks. He asked why she had gone, but Ethan had no answer that could heal him. He only held his son close and promised that he would never walk away. The days after her departure were filled with shadows. Ethan lost not only his company, but also the partner he had trusted. He had to sell their home and move into a small apartment with peeling walls and narrow rooms. He worked long hours at whatever job he could find, sometimes cleaning, sometimes lifting heavy loads, always with sore hands and weary bones. Yet no matter how tired he became, when he returned home, he still managed to smile for Noah. Noah grew weaker at times, needing constant care, but Ethan never complained. He cooked for him, carried him when the wheelchair could not move through tight places, and sat beside him at night until he fell asleep. The bond between father and son became stronger than iron. Ethan had nothing left to offer but love, yet that love was more powerful than anything money could buy. There were moments when Ethan thought he could not continue. The world seemed too heavy and the loneliness too deep. But then Noah would call his name, asking for help with a school task or laughing at something on the television.
Ow.
Those small moments filled Ethan's heart with courage. He told himself that even if everything else was gone, his son's smile was enough to keep him alive. 10 years passed in this way, with hardship shaping every step of their lives. Ethan was no longer the man who once owned a company. His hands were rough, his face lined, but his spirit had grown stronger. He had learned to survive with little, and he had learned the true meaning of devotion. Noah, though living with limits, carried the same quiet strength. He knew his father had given up everything for him, and he carried deep respect for the man who never left his side. The pain of abandonment remained, but it was wrapped in the comfort of loyalty. Ethan did not know what the future would bring, but he knew one truth: no matter how many years passed, no matter how hard the road became, he and Noah would walk it together. And in that promise, their souls stayed bound, even in the darkest hours. The years shaped Ethan into a different man. His dreams of wealth and power had faded, but his heart carried a new strength. Every morning he woke early, prepared breakfast for Noah, and pushed his son's wheelchair to the small school nearby. He worked through the day at the community center, fixing broken chairs, cleaning halls, and doing whatever job kept the rent paid. It was not the life he once imagined, yet it was a life filled with love for his son. Noah grew older with each passing year, and though his body was weak, his mind was bright. He loved books and stories, and he often asked Ethan to read to him at night. Ethan would sit beside him, his tired voice steady, while Noah listened with shining eyes. Sometimes Noah asked if his mother ever thought of them. Ethan never spoke against Laura, but he told Noah that some people could not stay, while others would never leave. And he promised again that he would always be one who stayed. Their apartment was small, but warm with their bond. On weekends, Ethan tried to give Noah moments of joy. He took him to the park, pushing his wheelchair under the wide trees, letting him feel the fresh air. Noah's laughter filled those days, making strangers stop and smile. Ethan lived for that sound, for that light in his son's eyes. It gave meaning to every sacrifice. Still, life was not easy. Money was always short. There were nights when Ethan ate very little so Noah could have enough. There were winters when the heater broke, and they wrapped themselves in old blankets, pretending it was an adventure. Ethan did not allow his son to see his despair. But in the silence of the night, he often felt the weight of his struggles pressing down. He wondered if he was giving Noah enough, if love could replace everything they had lost. Yet Noah never doubted his father. To him, Ethan was a hero. He saw the calloused hands, the tired steps, the quiet sighs when Ethan thought he was not looking. And in his young heart, he carried deep gratitude. He wanted to grow strong not only for himself, but also to honor the man who had given him everything. One evening, after a long day, Ethan sat on the small couch, while Noah worked on his school project. The boy was trying to draw a map, but his hands trembled. Ethan knelt beside him, guiding his hand gently. Noah looked up and whispered that he wished he could be like other boys, running and climbing. Ethan kissed his son's forehead and said that strength was not always in legs or arms. Strength lived in the heart, and Noah's heart was stronger than anyone he had ever known. That night, Noah smiled as he drifted to sleep, and Ethan sat watching him. His thoughts wandered to Laura again, but instead of anger, he felt a strange calm. She had left, and nothing could change that. But in leaving, she had given him something unexpected. She had given him the chance to build a bond with Noah that no one could ever break. 10 years of hardship had built a fortress of love between them. Ethan carried scars that were unseen, but those scars told a story of survival. Noah carried dreams that reached higher than his body could move, but his father's faith lifted him. Together, they formed a world of their own, small yet unshaken. And though Ethan did not yet know it, their lives were about to change. Fate was preparing to open a new door, one that would test his heart again and bring unexpected light into the path he had thought would always remain dark. Ethan had learned to live with routine. His days followed the same pattern of work, care, and rest. He had no space in his heart for dreams beyond Noah. His son's needs filled every corner of his life, and that was enough for him. Still, deep inside, there were moments when loneliness whispered to him. He never spoke of it, but when he saw other families together, he felt the absence of what he had lost. One spring morning, the community center where Ethan worked held a small event. Local families gathered for games, books, and food. Ethan had been asked to help set up tables and arrange chairs. He pushed through his tasks with the same focus he gave to everything. Noah sat nearby with a book on his lap, his smile calm and bright. That was the day Ethan met Grace. She was a teacher who often volunteered at the center. Her voice was gentle when she spoke to the children, and her smile was open. She noticed Noah first, leaning over to ask about the book he was reading. Noah looked up, shy at first, then began to explain the story. Grace listened with patience, nodding and laughing softly at his excitement. Ethan watched from a short distance, feeling something stir inside him. Later, when Grace came to thank him for helping at the event, Ethan only nodded and said little. He had grown used to silence, to keeping people away from his private world. But Grace was not discouraged. She saw the weariness in his eyes and the strength in his posture. And she felt curious about the man who carried so much yet stood so steady. In the weeks that followed, Grace returned often. She brought books for the children, planned small lessons, and always made time to greet Noah. The boy warmed to her quickly. He told his father that she made him feel seen in a way others did not. Ethan listened, unsure of how to respond. He had locked his heart behind walls for so long that he did not know if he could open them again. One afternoon when Ethan came to pick up Noah, Grace walked beside them. She asked about Noah's favorite stories and about Ethan's work. Ethan gave short answers, but Grace did not seem bothered. She told him that she admired how devoted he was to his son. Her words touched him more than he expected. As days passed, Grace's presence grew familiar. She began to visit their apartment, bringing food sometimes, or helping Noah with school projects. Ethan resisted at first, feeling uneasy about letting someone into their small world. But each time she came, she brought warmth with her. She laughed easily, listened carefully, and carried no judgment. Noah's joy whenever she arrived was clear, and Ethan found it harder to keep his distance. One evening, Grace stayed, after helping Noah with homework. When the boy fell asleep, she remained at the table with Ethan. She spoke about her own life, about the quiet dreams she carried and the losses she had endured. Ethan listened, surprised to find comfort in her words. For the first time in years, he shared a piece of his own story. He told her about his company, his bankruptcy, and the day Laura left. Grace did not pity him. She only looked at him with understanding. That night after she left, Ethan sat in the silence of the apartment. He thought about the way her presence had filled the rooms, the way Noah had smiled, the way his own heart had felt lighter. He had not planned for someone like her to enter their lives, yet now he wondered if this was the beginning of a change. He looked at his son sleeping peacefully and whispered a quiet promise: would not rush, and he would not risk their fragile peace. But he could not ignore the sense that fate had placed Grace in their path for a reason. Ethan's life had begun to feel steady again. Grace was part of their days, and Noah grew stronger with her encouragement. Yet life had a way of testing him when he least expected it. One afternoon, as Ethan finished his work at the community center, he turned and saw a face he thought he would never see again. It was Laura. She looked different from the woman he remembered. Time had taken away her brightness. Her clothes were fine, but her eyes carried emptiness. She smiled weakly and said his name. Ethan froze, memories rushing back with painful speed. He wanted to turn away, but his son's voice called from behind, asking who she was. Noah stared at the woman with confusion. He had not seen her since he was a child. Laura bent down, her voice shaking, saying she was his mother. Noah's face hardened. He remembered nights of tears, the waiting at the window, the silence that had followed her leaving. He said nothing and looked to Ethan instead. Ethan stepped forward, standing between them. Laura asked if they could talk. Ethan agreed, but only after Noah was safely home. Later, they met at a quiet cafe. She told him that the man she left for had betrayed her and left her with nothing. She spoke of regret, of missing her son, of wishing to return. Ethan listened without showing his anger. He remembered the night she had walked away, the years he had carried alone, the tears of his child. When she asked to see Noah more, Ethan shook his head. He said Noah was no longer the boy she had abandoned. He said trust was not something that could be claimed again so easily. Laura tried to hold his hand, but he pulled away. He told her that he had built a life from nothing, a life with his son, and she had no right to step back into it as if nothing had happened. That evening, when Ethan returned home, Noah asked him if it was true. Ethan told him, yes, his mother wanted to see him again. Noah sat silent for a long time. Finally, he said that she had made her choice once, and he had made his. His family was his father, and now also Grace. He did not want the past to disturb the peace they had found. Ethan felt pride in his son's strength, but also sorrow for the wound that could never fully heal. He held Noah close and promised that no one would ever take him away again. He thought of Grace and how she had stepped into their lives with care, never asking for anything but giving everything through her kindness. The difference between the woman who left and the woman who stayed was as clear as night and day. Laura tried to contact Ethan again in the following days, but he did not answer. He knew her regret came from loss, not love. The years had taught him to see truth in actions, not in words. He would not let his son's heart be broken again. Grace noticed something heavy in Ethan's eyes and asked him about it. He told her the truth, expecting judgment or fear. Instead, she placed her hand on his and said that the past could not harm them if they did not allow it. She told him she would stand beside him no matter what storms came. Her calm strength washed away the bitterness inside him. That night, as Ethan looked at Noah asleep and thought of Grace's words, he realized he was standing at a crossroad. The past had tried to return, but the future was offering him something better. He knew he had to make a choice, not only for himself, but for his son. And deep inside, his heart already knew which path was right. Ethan's life had begun to feel steady again. Grace was part of their days, and Noah grew stronger with her encouragement. Yet life had a way of testing him when he least expected it. One afternoon, as Ethan finished his work at the community center, he turned and saw a face he thought he would never see again. It was Laura. She looked different from the woman he remembered. Time had taken away her brightness. Her clothes were fine, but her eyes carried emptiness. She smiled weakly and said his name. Ethan froze, memories rushing back with painful speed. He wanted to turn away, but his son's voice called from behind, asking who she was. Noah stared at the woman with confusion. He had not seen her since he was a child. Laura bent down, her voice shaking, saying she was his mother. Noah's face hardened. He remembered nights of tears, the waiting at the window, the silence that had followed her leaving. He said nothing and looked to Ethan instead. Ethan stepped forward, standing between them. Laura asked if they could talk. Ethan agreed, but only after Noah was safely home. Later, they met at a quiet cafe. She told him that the man she left for had betrayed her and left her with nothing. She spoke of regret, of missing her son, of wishing to return. Ethan listened without showing his anger. He remembered the night she had walked away, the years he had carried alone, the tears of his child. When she asked to see Noah more, Ethan shook his head. He said Noah was no longer the boy she had abandoned. He said trust was not something that could be claimed again so easily. Laura tried to hold his hand, but he pulled away. He told her that he had built a life from nothing, a life with his son, and she had no right to step back into it as if nothing had happened. That evening, when Ethan returned home, Noah asked him if it was true. Ethan told him, yes, his mother wanted to see him again. Noah sat silent for a long time. Finally, he said that she had made her choice once, and he had made his. His family was his father, and now also Grace. He did not want the past to disturb the peace they had found. Ethan felt pride in his son's strength, but also sorrow for the wound that could never fully heal. He held Noah close and promised that no one would ever take him away again. He thought of Grace and how she had stepped into their lives with care, never asking for anything but giving everything through her kindness. The difference between the woman who left and the woman who stayed was as clear as night and day. Laura tried to contact Ethan again in the following days, but he did not answer. He knew her regret came from loss, not love. The years had taught him to see truth in actions, not in words. He would not let his son's heart be broken again. Grace noticed something heavy in Ethan's eyes and asked him about it. He told her the truth, expecting judgment or fear. Instead, she placed her hand on his and said that the past could not harm them if they did not allow it. She told him she would stand beside him no matter what storms came. Her calm strength washed away the bitterness inside him. That night, as Ethan looked at Noah asleep and thought of Grace's words, he realized he was standing at a crossroad. The past had tried to return, but the future was offering him something better. He knew he had to make a choice, not only for himself, but for his son. And deep inside, his heart already knew which path was right. Ethan carried the weight of choice in his heart. Laura's sudden return had stirred memories he had buried for years, but Grace's presence reminded him of what real love looked like. At night, when Noah was asleep, Ethan often sat awake thinking about the life he had built. He asked himself if he was strong enough to let go of the bitterness of the past and accept the hope that was standing before him. Noah had already made his feelings clear. He did not want to open the door to someone who had walked away when he needed her most. His trust belonged to his father, and now also to Grace. Ethan respected his son's words, yet he felt the weight of being fair. He did not want to act only out of anger, but he also knew that forgiveness did not mean forgetting the pain. One evening, Ethan took Noah to the park. Grace joined them, and together they sat under the wide branches of an old tree. Noah laughed as Grace told him a story about her childhood. Ethan found himself watching the way the sunlight touched her face. In that moment, he saw what his heart had been searching for. He did not need to question anymore. Grace was not the past. She was the future. Later that night, Ethan spoke with Grace while Noah slept. He told her about his fears, about the scars that still hurt. He told her he was afraid of opening his heart again and losing it all. Grace listened quietly, then told him that love was never about avoiding pain. It was about choosing someone who would not walk away when pain arrived. She told him she was willing to stand with him, not just for the good days, but also for the hard ones. Words touched Ethan deeply. He realized that Grace had never tried to change him or erase his struggles. She had simply stayed, showing loyalty and care through every action. In that moment, he felt a peace he had not known in years. He took her hand and told her he was ready to trust again. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy. Grace became even more involved in their lives. She helped Noah with his studies, cooked meals with Ethan, and filled their small apartment with laughter. Ethan noticed how Noah's eyes lit up whenever Grace was around. His son had accepted her, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as someone who truly cared. That acceptance gave Ethan courage. Laura tried once more to reach out, but this time Ethan met her with finality. He told her that their chapter had ended long ago. He told her that Noah no longer needed her confusion, and neither did he. His heart was no longer tied to the past. Laura left in silence, and Ethan felt no regret in watching her go. That night, Ethan sat with Grace and Noah at the dinner table. It was a simple meal, nothing grand, yet it felt like a feast. The warmth in the room, the laughter, and the bond between them filled Ethan with gratitude. He realized he had not just survived his pain, he had found something greater. He had found love that was tested by hardship and proven true. Before going to bed, Noah looked at his father and said he was glad that Grace was part of their family. Ethan nodded, his eyes heavy with emotion. For the first time in years, he felt whole. The choice was made, and his heart was free. The past no longer held him. The future was clear, and it was filled with love that would endure. 10 more years passed, and life had changed in ways Ethan once thought impossible. The small apartment was replaced by a modest but comfortable home. The rooms carried warmth, not from riches, but from love, that grew stronger each day. Noah had become a young man, older, but still filled with the same bright spirit. His body remained fragile, yet his heart carried courage beyond measure. Grace was now more than a visitor. She was a wife, a partner, and a mother figure to Noah. Together they had built a family that was unshaken by the storms of the past. Ethan often looked at her with quiet gratitude, wondering how fate had brought her into their lives, when he had nearly lost all hope. Her presence had been the light that led him out of the darkness. Noah had grown into his own dreams. He spent hours writing stories and even began sharing them with others online. He often spoke about his father's strength and Grace's kindness, telling people that true family was not always about who left, but about who stayed. His words touched many hearts, and Ethan felt proud every time he read his son's work. Ethan himself had also changed. He was no longer the man broken by failure and betrayal. The lines on his face showed struggle, but his eyes carried peace. He worked steadily at the community center and was respected for his honesty and dedication. More than once, people came to him for advice, inspired by his story of survival. He never boasted. He only spoke of love, sacrifice, and the importance of never giving up on those you hold close. Grace stood beside him in every step. She celebrated his smallest victories and shared his burdens without complaint. She reminded him that life was not measured by what you lost, but by what you built after loss. Together, they filled their home with simple traditions. Dinners at the table, walks in the park, evenings, reading stories aloud, and quiet prayers before sleep. These small moments became treasures greater than any wealth. Sometimes the past tried to whisper again. Ethan would remember the pain of Laura leaving, the long nights of loneliness, the fear of raising his son alone. But when he looked across the table and saw Noah smiling at Grace, or when he felt Grace's hand in his, he knew that the past no longer had power over him. It had shaped him, yes, but it no longer controlled him. On Noah's 20th birthday, the three of them gathered with a few close friends. The table was filled with food, laughter, and joy. Ethan watched his son open a small cake Grace had baked, and in that moment, he felt a wave of emotion. 10 years earlier, he had thought his life was over. Now he saw that his true story had only begun when he chose to fight for his son and accept love again. That night, after everyone left, Noah told Ethan that he wanted to dedicate his first book to him and Grace. He said they had shown him what love meant, and he wanted the world to know. Ethan could not hold back his tears. He embraced his son and whispered that Noah was his greatest gift. As he lay in bed beside Grace later, Ethan looked back at the road he had walked. It had been filled with pain, but it had also been filled with miracles. He understood now that love was not about who left, but about who stayed. And in that truth, he found peace. His soul was no longer broken, was bound forever to his son and to the woman who had given him a second chance at life.